Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got a lovely soul that comes us from down under. Her name's Sheryl Gottschall. Sheryl has had a lifelong interest in the paranormal, which began in her teenage years. But in 1980, she began seriously studying the phenomenon of near-death experiences. Soon after, she joined the International Association for Near-Death Studies. In 1995, hosted Dr. Ken Ring for the Brisbane leg of his Australian tour, where he presented research for his future book, Mindsight, Near-Death and Out-of-Body Experiences in the Blind. She also developed a deep interest in the UFO phenomenon, catalyzed by her father-in-law's interest after he attended a meeting hosting George Adamski in the 1960s. In 1988, she joined the Brisbane-based association UFO Research Queensland, and 3 years later took on the role of president. Then in 1992, Sheryl and her late husband, Dr. Martin Gottschall, established the first close encounter support group in Brisbane after Budd Hopkins Australian tour. Dr. Ring's book, The Omega Project, Near-Death Experiences, UFO Encounters, and The Mind at Large, ignited Sheryl's interest in the connections between UFOs and NDEs, which was now being corroborated by the witnesses she was interviewing. Sheryl has had many paranormal experiences, herself including an NDE, a bilocation experience, out-of-body experiences, UFO sightings, a close encounter with non-human intelligences, poltergeist activity, automatic writing, and other unexplained phenomena, all of which propel her to continue on her quest to understand what it means to be human. Sheryl's research bridges the afterlife and UFO subjects, and wanting to understand the UFO phenomenon more deeply led her to train into shamanism, which she now teaches. She speaks regularly about the UFO phenomenon and the afterlife at public meetings, conferences, community groups, schools, libraries, and has given hundreds of media interviews. She has written articles for many UFO and New Age magazines, and in 2018 was a regular guest on the weekly Spooky Action radio show and co-hosted the Strange Encounters Down Under radio show in 2019. Currently, she's a regular writer for the UFO Research Queensland bi-monthly publication UFO Encounter, and she works as a clinical hypnotherapist, teaches Reiki, art therapy, and shamanism. So, thanks so much for coming on, Sheryl.
Well, thanks for having me, Yannick.
So, well, you've been quite active in the field now, but to start off, when did your experiences actually start? Did it start off as a child? Did you see anything?
Well, as a child, I would always be outside looking at the stars and wondering if there were other beings out there, looking back at planet Earth, wondering if there were other beings out there. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, because my family, that was not in their worldview at that time at all. But I was always fascinated with everything from space. But then when I was a teenager and I started to do some work and I could get a little bit of my own money, I was buying a magazine and which had all paranormal experiences in it. So that sort of, catapulted my interest and moved it on, I suppose. But the experiences that I've had actually started. I joined UFO Research Queensland in 1988. So I'm just saying that because my experiences didn't didn't catapult me into joining the group. I joined UFO Research Queensland, and then in the early 90s, I had a close encounter experience myself, and a near-death experience in 1996, I think it was, and various other paranormal experiences. So that all started for me in my 20s.
So do you feel that your fascination with these stars and your involvement, created the energy, or at least showed them that you weren't afraid, and that might have been a catalyst to start off your journey?
It could have been, and that's an interesting point, because there does seem to be, after 33 years of speaking to witnesses, I've sort of come to think that people are prompted to into contact with extraterrestrials, or they are selected for various reasons. So yeah, it's all a possibility. My own mindset, my worldview, my psyche. Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah, because I believe, at least for some of us, there has to be a catalyst to bring us into this world. Mine was a meeting up with a British abductee, which I almost got married to. So after that, it's been like a snowball effect. Things have been happening, one after the other, and it's because of her I'm doing this interview, really, because I wouldn't have known about this world. It's a bit like Harry Potter in a strange way, because you don't know it exists until you're actually in it. I know it's strange, but yeah. So okay, so what happened when you started getting involved, within the certain groups and?
Well, I was meeting a lot of interesting people. Probably because it was 88, I got involved, and I was pretty much, boots on the ground out investigating with a mentor. And I found that we go to people's homes in those days, because we weren't overrun with so many reports then, and we had more people in the group too. But and I found that when we were talking to witnesses, that they would often say that they'd also had some sort of strange experience, because I'd say, oh, have you had any other unusual things happen to you? Meaning, in my own mind, related to the UFO subject. But they'd say, well, it wasn't UFO sightings or anything like that, but it was, I had this experience where I nearly died. And I found this happened over and over and over again. And I sort of put it on the shelf, because in those days, no one was really talking about how people who have near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences might relate to UFO witnesses or people who'd had contact experiences. We just hadn't made that bridge yet. So I put it on the shelf for a while, and I go, well, that's interesting. And it wasn't until later on when I hosted Dr. Ken Ring here, and because I'd done that, you mentioned his book, The Omega Project, UFO Encounters, NDEs, Mind at Large, etc. And I read that book with much enthusiasm, because it sort of woke up in my mind that, gosh, there is a connection between these. And I started to reflect back on the people that I'd spoken to and their stories. And I started to put it together then, that there's more to contact and the types of people who have contact. It's not, I don't think it's just genetic. Because there's a strong connection in the family line that people who have close encounters, other people in their family have those experiences too. And that's true. But I think maybe there's more to it than what we realise. I'm still trying to figure that part out.
Well, you made me think of something that you said that again, like NDEs and ETs sometimes are interrelated, and I can't remember who I interviewed, but this person had an NDE. He died, and he was expecting like to see Jesus or God, but like I think beside one the white light or what, he met a gray, and the gray spoke to him and sent him back because it wasn't his time. So that was pretty fascinating for me.
Yes, well, I've spoken to a couple of people like that, and one was a woman who I came in. Well, I'd known her for some years, but hadn't seen her for a long time, and she had been coming to our UFO meetings. And anyway, when I started the AfterLife group, she came to that as well, and she told the story of when she would be in her 60s now. So when she was 12 years old, so we're going back 50 years, she was having surgery, and the anaesthetic was confused somehow, and she couldn't breathe when she was unconscious. They weren't giving her enough oxygen and too much of something else. Anyway, so she left her body, and she said she'd had a near-death experience. She left her body, and she began going down a tunnel, which is a lot of people hear about in near-death experiences, but not always. And she was sort of lined up with streams of people going in this along in this tunnel. but there was also toward the light, but there was also a stream of people coming back from the light in the opposite direction. And in that stream of people she said she was looking at all the people going past her, going the opposite direction. And she saw this small being who she said he looked like there was something wrong with him. And she was, as a child, she was feeling very sorry for this being that looked quite deformed. Anyway, sometime later, apparently, she walked into one of our UFO meetings, and someone was talking about alien abduction experiences. And on the screen was an image of a grey. And she said, that is exactly what I saw in that coming back from the light in her near-death experience. So that's a really interesting story for me, but it's not the only one that I've heard. Because another one was, and this one I'd put on the shelf, I heard this back in, I was told this back in 95, when I had bought a property to open a new age centre. And one night I had a night about near-death experiences, because I had a long time interest in it. And I'd invited a woman to come and speak, and she brought a friend. And the friend later told me that when her daughter was young, her daughter died, and she'd been to the funeral that day, and she came home, and she was quite bereft because of the death of her daughter. And she laid down on her bed, and she said she could feel her heartbeat slowing. And the next thing she knows, she's left her body, and she's walking along this sort of windy path with the soul of her daughter. And she gets to the point of no return, where she's met by some type of spirit being, and the spirit being says to her, you can't go any further, and I'll take your daughter now. So, she hands the daughter over to the spirit being. This is a very short version. And then she returns along the path. But as she does, she sees a UFO. Somehow she enters the UFO. I can't quite remember the full details now. And she finds herself laying on some type of table. Now, remember, this is in her out-of-body state. Yeah. Right? And it's quite curious. And they do some sort of examination on her, not necessarily, I think, physical, but she laid down on this table, and they're sort of, giving her the once-over. And then she gets up, and she leaves the UFO, and she walks back down this windy path and wakes up on a bed. So these are two stories of people having some sort of alien contact or seeing them, and that's not the only ones, while they're in an out-of-body state. And of course that gets me to think, well, what on earth does that mean? Can extraterrestrials, and let's just call them that for now, can they traverse another dimension that we refer to as the afterlife, or in another state of consciousness, or do they populate that particular realm? We don't really know. So it's a very big question. And I think for a long time, UFO researchers have really underestimated the size and the vastness of the phenomenon, and how much human beings can be intertwined with it.
What fascinates me the most is these individuals who've never had any ET contact in the physical, but when they've got these out-of-body experiences, describe exactly what a lot of experiencers see in the physical. Regarding the work you did, so you do the normal MUFON type of stuff, field work that they do here in the US? Okay.
Yes, yeah. So we receive reports from the public when they're, how could I say it, when there's a close encounter in particular, we will interview the witnesses. Of course, we don't have as many people these days as we used to in our UFO group, but when it's an extremely good sighting, we will go out and interview them, try and locate where they saw it and all that sort of thing. But these days, a lot of people tend to see lights in the sky. They get, which is important too, don't get me wrong. But, there's a lot of misidentifications with the satellites that are going up and all those sorts of things. So we don't get the UFO reports that we used to back in the 90s of very close-up craft and full of detail, and the close encounters that we used to receive back in those days.
Now, one thing that I've been really curious about is like during the years, like the 1970s, it was a lot of talk about the Venusians, and then it came to the Greys, and now we're talking about mantids and reptilians. Now, do you know if there's like a certain type of like race only that tends to maybe visit Australia, or there's like, have you read reports about different types of beings?
Yes, and that's one of the interesting things, because I've been, like in the 1990s, we received that was probably the peak time, we received probably about, I think it was about 3,500 to 4,000 reports from people during that 10-year period of people having close encounters and very close-up sightings. But the types of beings that people were reporting, what we were hearing here anyway, was from America. It was all about the grey aliens at that time involved in abduction experiences. But here we were getting a wide range of descriptions of beings, much wider than what we were hearing coming from America. I don't know why. It was just the different descriptions that we were getting reports of greys. Some were blue, some were gold. On a rare occasion, they were a goldy colour. Some had skin like dolphins. Not all looked like greys. Some were very humanoid and human-looking, I should say. We had the Nordic reports, of course. Yeah, so we had the smaller beings, like there's a phenomenon here in northern Queensland, the small hairy men. There's a whole variety of beings that we receive reports about.
I think you guys call it, at least the Yowie, I believe. Like
yes, yeah.
Well, which are normally a lot taller than like 3 foot, but.
Yeah, well, I think in the States they call it Bigfoot. So
Bigfoot,
yeah.
Sasquatch, yeah, okay.
I've had 6 sightings, but there were 2 that were quite significant in that one was in 1992, where there was a group of us on a Skywatch, actually. And I guess you could call it a very early CE5,
yeah.
because the week before we'd decided that we would put out thoughts that we would see a UFO. And we weren't doing the usual, we didn't have an app or anything like that in those days. But we were just putting out thoughts all during the week that we would see something and we would make contact. Anyway, we went to a place called Wivenhoe Dam, which is about 45 minutes west of Brisbane. And and at our Sky Watches, we have an all-night roster. So for 2 or 3 hours, we would have a group of 3 people on watching the sky. So the sky is watched all night. Anyway, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. There were 3 guys who were watching, and they had been seeing an orange light in the sky, and they'd been watching it. But when they looked at it through binoculars, it was 3 orange lights, but they were just very close together. Anyway, they decided it was worth waking people up, so someone ran down and managed to wake up 8 people, and I was one of them. And I'd had a video camera, and it was the old type of video camera which actually had a video in it. Yeah. And it had been working that day. Well, it wasn't working that night, was it? So anyway, I'd raced over to where they'd said they were seeing it, and we happened to be on a piece of land that was jutting out into the waters, and it was on a slight slope. So I ran up over the crest of the hill and ran down the other side where these 3 objects were over the water. And the first thing I saw was the reflections of the objects on the water as I was looking down, and then I looked up and I saw them, and they were 3 orange football-shaped objects that were glowing like the colour of hot coals when you blow on them, that sort of orangey gold colour. And they were just drifting along silently, and one just went out like that. the other one drifted off slowly and disappeared from sight. And the third one went to the other side of another, and came down another piece of land. And so some of the guys got in a car, they raced around to that side, trying to see if they could find anything. I mean, that was pretty, pretty interesting that they would do that, but they were just very excited about it. And I think they were trying to see if there was some sort of hoax device that had actually come down. And the way it was glowing, it was like it was hot. And but they found nothing in the area. So we all went, wow, that was pretty amazing, because there were 8 of us who actually saw it. But couldn't find anything that night. So the next morning they went back again, they had a look in the area, and there was nothing, none of the leaves on the trees were burnt. There was no Chinese lantern on the ground, nothing, couldn't find a thing where this object had come down. So it's remained a mystery to that day, but it was pretty interesting that there are 8 of us who actually saw it.
The trees were burnt?
No, they weren't. There was nothing. There was no sign of anything having any effect on the environment at all.
Wow. Okay. Now let's get into your experiences. Were the NDEs that happened to you? Well, how many NDEs did you have? 1? Just one NDE. Okay. Yeah. Thank God.
And I had a fairly significant out-of-body experience too. But with the near-death experience, it was 1990 or 91. I can never quite remember exactly which year. Anyway, because I have to say, I don't remember the year, because for 15 years I told myself it was a hallucination. That's why. I sort of really struggled with it, because one, I was a UFO researcher, and I didn't want people to think that hanging around with people who were reporting abduction experiences and close encounters was having its effect on me. Well, who knows? It could have. I don't know. But I don't, now these days, I don't think that. But then I was a bit concerned about that. Anyway, I woke up in the early hours of the morning, and the bedroom window was on my side of the bed. There was only about 1 meter between me, the bed, and the window. And in that space, I saw 3 small beings. And they were typical grey aliens, except they were dark because they were silhouetted by the street light out on the footpath. So I couldn't really see their faces. But I have a memory of seeing their eyes. And so that's one of those strange situations where you've got 2 different memories, but you can't quite reconcile how that can be. Anyway, the memory I have is of their eyes, which are the big dark wraparound eyes. And but they were standing there, and they were only very short. They wouldn't have been more than probably about 4 feet tall, and they were quite emaciated looking. And I'm not a person to shirk from pouncing on someone physically to protect other people or myself. So if necessary, that is, I don't go around beating people up. But if I had to, I would. And so this is something that sort of I wondered about, like, why didn't I just get up and, you know, hit them away or something like that? I could have. But anyway, so I did a very strange thing. First of all, I was terrified. I was terror struck. I really came to understand what that word meant at the time. The next thing I did unconsciously was pull the sheet up over my head and started saying the Lord's Prayer. And I don't know why, but the next thing I remember is waking up in the morning and having no memory of what had transpired the night before. And until about lunchtime, or just after lunch the next day, and something triggered my memory, and I remembered what had happened. Now, and I sort of went, whoa, what was that all about? Anyway, my ex-husband, he was asleep in the bed next to me, and he suffered from insomnia. So in those days, we would still have the milkman who could be a block away and, you know, rattling milk bottles, and my husband would wake up. Well, he didn't stir the whole night. And I guess that's one of those things that we often hear, isn't it, where partners of people having these experiences are sort of just out to it. Yeah. Anyway, for a long time, I sat on that story, and I've never dug around to have hypnotic regression or anything like that, because I'm a hypnotherapist myself, and I know that when you unleash the unconscious mind, you unleash a lot of creativity. And I didn't want to sort of colour my memory of the experience with anything else that my unconscious might like to fill in with the gaps, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've just left it on the shelf. So that was that particular experience. And then I became quite ill, which is interesting. That happened in 1991. By 1992, I was quite ill. And that illness lasted for 10 years. And in 1996, I had a near-death experience. And I'd been ill for 10 years with a serious chronic illness, and there were 3 years of acute illness to the point where I couldn't walk to the bathroom to wash myself or anything like that. My husband had to carry me for a while there. Anyway, I'd been to traditional doctors and to alternative therapists, naturopaths, homeopaths, you name it, I'd been there. Nothing was working, and in a last-ditch effort, a friend of mine took me to a hands-on healer. I had a session with that person, came home, and that was it. I laid down on the couch. He said, will you be all right if I leave you here? And I said, I'm fine, because my husband will be home in about 10 minutes. I'll be fine. And he left, and I was in the house by myself, laying on the sofa. And then something interesting happened. Something like a very malleable ice cream cone on its side emerged from the wall of the lounge room. And it sort of came across like this, and it opened up like that. And it was about 6 feet across in diameter, and it was swirling. So it was a big circle like this, but it narrowed down to a funnel. And I guess you could say it was a tunnel. Anyway, it started to, I separated from my body because it had started to draw me in with this very strong, what felt like a gravitational force. And I wasn't going. And the non-physical part of me had sort of grabbed onto the back of the couch, and I'm straining not to be pulled into it, and my physical body's just lying there. And again, I was terror-struck. It was the same sense of terror that I'd had when I'd had this close encounter experience, and I knew it was malevolent. I knew that if I went there, it would not be a good thing. It wasn't just about knowing that you wouldn't come back. It was a real sense of malevolence. And that was the same experience I had with the close encounter. There was a really strong sense of malevolence. And I think that was what triggered the feelings of terror in me. And yet there was nothing going on. It was like another sense, my sixth sense said, this is not good, you know. So anyway, what happened then was, while I'm struggling with this, not wanting to be dragged off into goodness knows where, something like a ticker tape went through my mind. You know, the old ticker tapes with the information on that would come out of the old machines during the War time. I think they call it a ticker tape machine or something. Anyway, very long, thin paper message. And my daughter's name was on it, strangely enough.
Wow.
And as soon as I saw that, everything stopped. Everything just completely disappeared and went back to normal. My husband walked in, and that was that. So that was, you know, it wasn't a full-blown near-death experience, but it was a connection with something that was very, well, actually, I don't even know what it was, Yannick, to tell you the truth. It's very strange, yeah. But then prior to that, I'd had an out-of-body experience as well. And I had been sitting on the front veranda watching my daughter, who was about three at the time. Now she's just about to turn 34, so that tells you how long ago it was. And I looked, it was a beautiful day. I was very relaxed, and I think that had something to do with it. I was in a very blissful state, just watching her play in the front yard. And I looked up, and I looked on top of the power pole outside the house, and there was a bird sitting there. The next thing I know, I've left my body, and I'm the bird. I'm up in the bird, looking through the bird's eyes, looking at me down on the veranda and my daughter playing in the yard. And I'm thinking, by the time I went, what the heck? You know, like it's just a shock because it was so spontaneous. But I was back in my body. But while I was in that out-of-body state, I could see everything as clearly as if I was using my own vision. So that was pretty profound for me, and it sort of confirmed for me that, yes, I'd heard lots of other people's stories about, you know, being out of body, etc., and near-death experiences, which I'd had. But that really clinched it for me that, yes, our consciousness can definitely exist outside of our physical body. I didn't see a silver cord or anything like that connecting me to my body, which some people have talked about. I don't hear a lot of those stories these days, though. But yes, and I was in the bird. My consciousness was using the bird's vision. And I guess that sort of experience sort of led me to shamanism.
Okay.
Which is what you mentioned earlier, you know, the shamanic practice of being able to utilize the senses of animals in nature for your own purpose, basically. So, yeah, so there's some of the experiences that I've had.
But why you?
Well, that's the other question, isn't it? I've heard, have you ever heard of something called the Tibetan Terma tradition? Okay. Well, it's very, I guess you could say, well, let me just start at the beginning, but very briefly. A Tibetan terma can be physical. It can be a physical object which is buried, that contains knowledge, and it is dug up at a later date for the times that where it's needed. It can also be information that is planted in someone's mind that will awaken at a certain time in their life when it's really important for them to be awakened. It may not be in the same life. It could be in a future life. It could be in 5 or 10 incarnations down the track. But a master with that ability can do some pretty amazing things for people who are on a certain path, put it that way. And so I've since wondered whether now in shamanism, just before I get onto that, in shamanism, it's thought that all shamans are born with the seed in their consciousness. And I would put to you and anyone watching this that people who have close encounters, this is one of those awakening experiences that if they were in a culture where that was fully accepted and there was a context for those experiences to exist in a positive, constructive manner, that they could very well go on to become shamans in their own tribe or for their tribe. And same with people who have near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, that see, in Western society, we don't have the practice of shamanism. It's not part of us, even though now we are bringing it back for ourselves and making shamanism a modern practice, like urban shamans, you know, in the Western world. And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. Some people do. But I think that shamanic type of personalities, put it that way, and Dr. Ring said he believed there was an encounter-prone personality. Shamanic-prone personalities are born for the times when they are needed, for whatever reason, for whatever purpose, and it doesn't mean they're any better than anybody else. It just means they serve a purpose, they serve a role in their community to know something and pass it on to their tribe, basically, to help their tribe grow and expand and evolve. That's the other part of it. So when you say, why you, or why you, Yannick, or anyone else watching this, I do believe that people who have these experiences have a purpose in our society. They've been struggling with trying to, one, come to terms with it themselves, two, to be accepted in the Western community, and three, knowing what the hell it is they're supposed to do, you know? So, yeah, that's how I see it anyway.
You spoke about the Greys. Have you ever seen them, or have you ever had other experiences with them?
No, that was the only particular experience I've had, and I wondered why. Why did I have that one experience? What was that all about? I don't know. I haven't. I mean, I've seen UFOs. I've had about actually 7 sightings now of things that were, quite mysterious. They weren't misidentifications or anything like that. They were just doing strange things. So I haven't seen any other greys. That's my answer.
Because I'm wondering if anything happened while you were a kid. Because a lot of experiencers do see stuff when they're children, when they're at a young age, or let's say around the age of 3. A lot of children see ghosts, or they still have memories of their past lives. So, have you ever had anything?
Not when I was a child. When I was that age, I was living on a cattle station in outback Queensland. So, but I did have the other interesting thing that came out of Ken Ring's work is that he found that people because he was trying to understand the connection between people who've had near-death experiences and close encounter experiences. What is the connection, and he found that they are very similar types of beings, people in that they were much less materialistic than before their experiences, or generally, I think. They were spiritually engaged or became spiritually engaged. They were highly creative people. They really cared less about what other people thought about them. But I found, particularly in the people who report close encounters, they have been very concerned about the environment. So they've been very environmentally conscious and quite concerned. And I've had people in my home crying, because of all the terrible things that mankind has perpetrated on animals, So, and there's a strong tendency towards vegetarianism. So there are a lot of things that they have in common. Also, they have a lot of these paranormal abilities. They can become precognitive. They can know things about people as soon as someone walks in the room. There's a lot of things that can happen. There was one gentleman I interviewed some years ago where he had been having contact experiences for quite a long time. And he said one day he went to put his key in the door to open up to his apartment, and the key just melted in his hand. So he did a bit of a Uri Geller, you know what I mean? So there's all these other strange types of experiences that occur. They can't wear they can't wear a watch. When they're around electrical devices, they play up. I've had one person saying that the boot of their car would always pop open all the time and they wouldn't be doing anything. They had it checked. There was no reason for it, but it was the electronics. And that only happened when they got in the car, nobody else. They have all this street lamp interference as they're driving down the road. In fact, my colleague Barry Taylor was taking Susie Hansen to our meeting one night, and they drove past the lights and they all went pop, pop. They just turned off as they drove past, and he'd had experiences too. So, there's a whole lot of things that happen around people. And it's like their electrical system has been changed because of their experiences. And I know Dr. Ring, he talked about that. He talked about the effects, how the after effects are psychophysical, and their psychology changes and their physiology changes. So there's this change in diet, there's a change in behavior, the change in their mental outlook and their emotional responses, all those types of things because of their experiences.
Yeah, I've been vegan for 4 years now. I'm not dead, so you don't have to eat meat. And I feel so sad on seeing the what we've done to the animals. I see when people eat meat, like, don't you realize for a quick fix, you've actually killed a living being?
Yes.
And through whatever torture they went through, the killing process is awful. So we're butchering them. So I feel so bad for them. And
Yeah.
have you?
Well,
Uh,
I was just going to say, I've been a vegetarian for 32 years, so I'm still fit and healthy now.
yeah.
And my illness had nothing to do with being a vegetarian either.
Have you ever experienced like paranormal stuff within your home?
Yes, yes. Yeah. But when I was ill, I went to see another healer actually. And actually, that's another point. I'd forgotten about that. But when I became ill, uh, I started to know things about people, and I didn't want to know. I would get visions from people about what was going on in their life, and I'd think, no, I'm not going to, promptings to tell them something. I said, no, I'm not telling them that. I'm just refused to get involved in their lives. Anyway, that was one side effect from the illness. But when I was ill, I went to see this healer, and afterwards, my mother's brother, deceased brother, appeared to me. He died in a car accident at age 4, and he made himself known to me. She couldn't see him. I was not psychic. I'm not a psychic. No, I'm not that sort of person, right? Nothing's going on in there, but not normally anyway. But under certain circumstances, I think these things can be switched on. So he appeared to me, not in a physical form, but I had a very strong sensation, so strong that I could almost see him. And he was communicating with me through the experience. Unfortunately, she was a very spiritual person, so she understood these things. And then I said, I can see this violet light coming in through the window, and it's shining all over my body. Can you see that? She said, no, I can't see that, but I'm sure it's happening. Anyway, so I came home that day, and when I was in the kitchen chopping up the vegetables for dinner, the clock in front of me that was on the wall, it just went, whoop, it just dropped off the wall, like that, jumped off the wall. Actually, it didn't slide down. If that would have, if something would happened, it would have just slid down the wall. It didn't, jumped off. And I had the sense that my mother's deceased brother was still around me the whole day. Maybe perhaps in that moment when I was there in that relaxed state receiving healing, he felt that he could appear and communicate to me. And it was actually about a message from my mother, which I never told her because she'd think I was a Fruit Loop. So because she's not that way inclined at all. So, but it wasn't that important. It was just that he was there and the role that he played in her life, basically. So there's that type of thing. There was a bilocation experience I had, again, with this lady. She was running a workshop, and during the workshop, we were all sitting around in a group, and I found myself, I was still in the room, but I also left my body and went outside. It was in the evening, and I touched down under a tree, just very gently, just came down to stand under a tree, and I could feel the coolness of the grass under my feet. And I'm thinking, this is weird, but at the same time, I was still in the room. So I was aware of being in two places at once at the same time. So I guess that's the only thing I could think to call that was a bilocation experience. And I didn't snap back into my body or anything like that. I just slowly just became aware of being in my body again. So there's been a few things like that, yeah.
Wow. Now, what type of state were you in when you bilocated? Were you under stress? Did something forcefully happen? Okay.
No, I was in this workshop, and we were just sitting very quietly, just having some quiet time together. And I think she was just about to take us into a meditation or something like that. But we're all sitting very quietly and relaxed, and that was when I just sort of popped out of my body. Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
So all these things that have happened have all been, I have not sought them. They have happened spontaneously.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason.
Yeah, same for me. I've been asking, around, like, I had an open heart surgery in 2016. So let's say the year prior to that, I wasn't afraid of death because I knew, because of, all the experiences I had, there's something out there. And we don't really die, we just go somewhere else. But I asked the universe for an out-of-body experience. I wanted to see what's beyond. And one night I started having these electrical pains throughout my entire body. I heard like metallic buzzing sounds, and I felt as if my body was being ripped apart. Like my soul was being moved one way and my body going the other way. And I say out loud, I know what you're doing, but I'm afraid. Try some, another way. Because I suspected they were trying to force an OBE out of me. And as soon as I say that, I black out, and then I realize I'm in front of the bed on something white. So I'm not sure if it's a mattress or not. But I'm looking downwards, and then I start going up. I go through the basement ceiling, the roof, and this is going quite fast. So I'm in orbit already. These three huge like outdoor theater screens appear in front of me. And what I'm seeing is that the feeling that I'm getting it from that, those three screens, is I'm seeing images of my past or videos of my past. And I thought I was going to die. And for some reason, I totally felt disconnected from the body down below, and as if it was the real me. And I said, okay, I know what you want to do. All right, let's do it. And then I sort of black out, and I appear in front of this kid, like maybe 3 feet tall for some reason. And he looks at me and he smiles, and all I see is rotten teeth. I have no idea why I saw that. And he says, you're like so-and-so's son, like, because my mother passed away a few years ago. And he says, she's really nice. I know where she is. Let's go and find her. And as soon as we start walking to going to my mom, I black out and I wake up the next morning. So I was really pissed. But there was a lot of stuff that happened regarding my ex-fiance and my mom. When my mom passed away, she was able to come back from the UK to Canada to help me out with my dad. And my mom came to speak to her during the night while she slept. She wakes up. Is Yanni, go get a piece of paper. So I go find her a piece of paper and a pen. And she starts jotting down what my mother was saying. My mother only speaks French, but normally 3/4 of the page, we could read that my girlfriend at the time was trying to write in French. And then in the dream, whatever, my fiance asks her, speak to me in English. I don't understand a word. So my mom switches to English, and the last part of the message was in English. Mm. And it said, look in the drawer by the window. But when I started trying to read the French part, I could actually make out words. My fiance only spoke British. Mm. So the next day we show this to my dad, and we start going around the house, looking at the drawers near the window. And where the TV was, there was a drawer just beneath it, right beside the patio window. And in that was my mom's dream diary. And the second to last entry was a dream where my mom actually heard from my grandmother that passed away, because she came in her dream to tell her that she was going to have an operation in the chest area, but it's going to be okay. But that was what happened to my mom. My mom passed away because of that.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I had a friend who his mom passed away, and he was with friends on his deck, and his phone starts ringing, and on the phone was not a normal number. So he takes up the phone and says hello, and he hears this female say, Mac, I'm all right. But my friend's name's Matt. Her nickname for her son was Mac. So she connected with him through the phone to tell him that everything was okay. So I've got a lot of these stories that really prove that there's more to life after death.
Absolutely, and I've heard quite a few of those myself. Aside from UFO Research Queensland and my AfterLife discussion group, we also run a page called Strange Encounters Down Under, and that was the page that was supporting hosted the Strange Encounters radio show for a year. And there's a lot of stories on there of people having these types of experiences. And one of the shows that we did, actually there's a YouTube channel as well, Strange Encounters Down Under. And we put the radio shows up on there, and one of them was about, I think it was in there, telephone calls from the dead. And Yeah, it's a phenomena that happens, and I've spoken to people myself who've received text messages on the number from their deceased brother or sister or deceased husbands or whatever, and like 6 months after they've died, and that number should have been decommissioned by then. But how does it happen?
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Are you aware if recently, like in the last few years, if there's been more contact in Australia regarding ETs, or like more sightings? Have they ramped up?
No, it's gone the other way. It's much quieter.
Okay.
The types of reports that we receive are not as rich in detail or close as what they used to be. There might be all sorts of reasons for that. We don't know. They haven't gone away. And we're still getting reports from outback Queensland in particular, where there's a lot, the population is a lot less dense. And I guess, if I was an extraterrestrial who wanted to remain incognito, I certainly wouldn't be flying over a capital city or anything like that, which does make you wonder why they do it anyway at times. But so, yeah, there is a book by an Australian researcher called UFO Dreaming, which is about Australian Aboriginal reports, which is very interesting too. So, and I have had a few calls over the last few years from Aboriginal people who have said there's a lot of stuff going on out here that you don't know about. But they don't have anyone to report it to out in the Australian Centre, because there is no one out there where they can actually go and talk face to face. But occasionally they'll track us down and call us and tell us about what they've seen. Everything from crashed UFOs to beings and all those, what they suspect is a crashed UFO, to beings. And there's a place just south of the Queensland border, which is my home state, called Lightning Ridge. And some years ago, there was a gentleman out there collecting reports about what people were seeing out in the opal fields. It's a well-known area for opal mining. And there were, reports of landed UFOs and beings coming out of them and all those types of things. So, but unfortunately, he's since passed away. Like many active researchers in Australia, they have passed away. And the younger generation, while they're enthusiastic in Australia, they don't seem to have grabbed the significance of documenting reports carefully, put it that way.
Especially the past.
Sorry?
Especially the past, because I hate seeing these people these individuals who've worked all their lives on and collecting these data, and I'm wondering if they do pass down to somebody else all their research. Yeah.
In some cases it does. It gets passed on. Like we are the curators of some of at least half the files from the Australian Centre for UFO Studies, and also from the work of a Queensland researcher called Claire Noble, who was heavily involved in the Tully UFO NES cases. I don't know if you're aware of that, but there's a gentleman called Albert Panisi up in a place in northern Queensland called Tully, where a UFO, that was on his property, but it was actually his neighbour, George Pedley, who was driving his tractor one day, and he saw a UFO, a grey UFO, round UFO, classic shape, lifting up from an area where there was a lagoon. I don't think he didn't actually see it coming out of the water, but he saw it lifting up and then going above the trees. I think it turned on its side and then took off. And then when he kept on going, and then when he came back, he saw where just under where the UFO had been, the reeds in the lagoon there was a swirling mass of reeds floating on the top of the lagoon. And it was quite thick. It was thick enough for people to actually sit on and float. And he dived under the water, and they could, the reeds had been completely pulled up from the bottom, so he could swim underneath this huge mat of reeds, circular reeds in a swirled shape. So those types of reports, we don't get those these days. Yeah, unfortunately. And I think either the UFO phenomenon has changed, because it changes locations too, as we know. those who've been in the field for a long time know that it's a hot spot here and it goes cold there, and it's a hot spot there and a cold here, whereas it may have been the other way around previously. We don't know. We don't know why.
Yeah, a lot of us say there's this like a 7-year gap, like a wave. There for 7 years there might be like loads of activity, then it cuts short for a while, then it comes back. Yes. At least from my experience, a lot of stuff happened from 2009 up to 2013, especially in 2012, because we thought it was the end of the world, and so a lot of stuff happened after that. And after with the years following that, it started to trickle down, and I'm not having a lot of stuff happen to me for the last since 2016. Now, I'm not sure if it's the reason why, because I started talking about these my experiences. That might be a contributing factor, but again, what I'm hearing is that a lot of people haven't had anything of importance recently.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that from other researchers in Australia too, that there's not a whole lot of activity going on. Now, that could be for various reasons, as well as what I said with the phenomenon's change. It could also have to do with the movement of the planets, for example. So some extraterrestrials, let's call them that, could have bases on certain planets where their technology can take off from. Let's just say in that one particular sort of idea. And the planets move, and if planets move away out of orbit, it may be harder for them to travel so far. And when the planets come into alignment again, then they can travel again, like we do with Mars and the moon and all those sorts of things. So, I mean, it could be a million reasons why, Yeah.
Well, just look at NASA when they plan out certain events.
Yeah.
Again, the everything in orbit has to be in a proper place to actually, have a successful mission. Have you ever heard of Wanjinas?
Yes, the Wanjina spirits. Yes.
Okay, that's a thing that I think that's only native to Australia. Is it?
Yes. Well, put it this way: they're called Wanjina here. I'm not sure what's happening in other countries. I'm sure there's similar types of things in other countries too.
Okay, because when I had this experience, and it's the only thing that at the time that resembled what I saw was Wanjinas, and those are like, I believe, grays, but they're painting of grays perhaps, and on cavern walls.
Certainly paintings of beings with round eyes, no nose or mouth, and they seem to be emitting, or painted as if they're emitting a light.
Right.
Now, some years ago, we had a gentleman who came to speak at our group, excuse me, about the work that he'd done with, I think it was Courtney Brown, on remote viewing. And he was involved in a project to remote view life on Mars. And he talked about that. But he also talked about they tried to remote view God. Well, they got nothing. Okay. But they did remote view beings that were very similar to what's known as the midwayers in the book of Urantia. Now, the midwayers are beings that are just outside of human, the range of human perception, visual perception. And they're not tall, they're quite small, about 3-4 feet height. And they help, I guess you'd call them, they're like death walkers. When people die, they help people go to where they're supposed to go, right? They help protect people and make sure they get to their destination where they're supposed to be after they die. But they are known to have something like a halo around their head, like a light emanation. And I have wondered whether the Wanjina spirits are very similar to the midwayers, in that, I mean, the midwayers have only been spoken about since about 1920 or 1950, I think, in the book of Urantia, when that was published. But, these things have been around for a long time in our history, in Indigenous peoples' mythology. And the Wanjina spirits are a part of the Australian Aboriginal mythology.
Yeah, well, that's what I've read, and but the reason why I'm talking about this is one time in 2013, my fiance was living with me, And I wake up to this was in December. I wake up because my bed's right beside the doorway, and I was sleeping on that side of the bed. So I wake up and I'm seeing this black hole right in my doorway. And it was like paper thin, so it wasn't like, it was 2D. It didn't have any depth to it. And then I realized that, nothing was holding it in place. Then so I get up and I switch on the light. So nothing, it disappears. So my fiance wakes up and she says, what's happening? And she was really agitated. And I tell her that I just saw a black hole in the middle of my doorway. And she says, no, I'm not waking up because of that. Not because of you, at least. A man was speaking in her mind, saying constantly EMP, electromagnetic pulse. And we thought we were being attacked because, both things happening at the same time was a bit like too like way off. It was strange. So we were really freaked out about it. So it took about half an hour. We fall back asleep. And so I tend to wake up a lot during the night. But I get the feeling that I'm seeing movement right coming in through the doorway into my bedroom. But I black out again. This time I wake up, I'm on her, I'm leaning to her side of the bed. So she's right in front of me. And so like I open my eyes and I feel super drugged up. Like when you wake up from like a surgery. But I didn't have my glasses on, of course, but my eyesight's good enough to see everything without it. And but what I'm seeing in the darkness of the bedroom, like there was enough moonlight and street light coming through the living room and into the my bedroom. So I'm still seeing everything in the bedroom, but I'm seeing these what I thought were like wanjinas, one in front of the bed and like 4 on her side of the bed, just moving around. But they were all I saw was shadows. But the shadows were darker than the surrounding blackness of the bedroom, and they were like 6 feet tall though. But they had really broad shoulders. And all I could see was the shadow of that entity, let's say. So it had really broad shoulders. And when there would be a neck, there weren't any neck. All I saw was a huge round helmet on their head. And they were just moving around. And as soon as I'm able to raise my hand and say hi, and as soon as I do that, I black out. I wake up. I realize I'm standing, but I'm probably naked because I'm seeing my bare feet, but I'm wearing hospital robes. Mm. And as soon as I realize that, I black out again, and I wake up the next morning. So I started researching, and all I found that looked a lot like what I saw were wanjinas. And then I realized, that thing, the story was something that happened down under. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Mm. But it is interesting, all the different types of beings that people see. And I'm always fascinated by why they see robed beings. Why are extraterrestrials wearing robes? And which is something that we can recognize. And sometimes they're reported as having different colors. Sometimes they're reported as like the fabric is described as when it moves, the light catches it and it's almost twinkles. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting that they wear robe beings, and some have reported wearing hats. It's strange. It's a very strange aspect to the subject, and it's something that I have dug around in a bit.
Well, when I saw a picture once of, this might have been Simon Park's drawing, I can't recall, but his mantis had what could have been a cape or a robe. Mm. So when I saw the shadow people with wearing helmets, like if you only saw the body, you would have seen at least the silhouette of the body. But all I saw was something that started off from the shoulders and went directly down to the floor. So that could have been a cape or a robe, like you said. Mm. Mm. So that's quite fascinating. But again, like what really happened, I have no idea.
Yes, there's a very, very big part of the story missing, isn't there?
Yeah, but what and shadow people, a lot of the times when I'm hearing stories about shadow beings, some of them have like top hats.
Yes, yes. Actually, I gave a presentation to my AfterLife group about shadow beings, and it was amazing how many people had actually seen them. So, but if anyone wants to see any of those, they can go to the Afterlife Discussions YouTube channel too and see all those there. Yeah, if you're interested in more of those paranormal aspects.
I'll be able to add all the links in the description.
Yeah.
So, and to the Star Fam, hope you guys enjoyed today's show. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So, take care, everyone. Hello everyone, this is Mr. Gray, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.